if you learn to cite as you write, and if you have a source library like EndNote and you plug that into Word, then the time it takes for you to cite as you write will be drastically diminished. And that's why very often we do actually reference later. So we think, okay, I'm just going to get this writing done, and then I'll go back and work out, where I reference different sources and how I bring them in, etc. So I would highly recommend that you try not to do that. Obviously, we always have deadlines and sometimes it's not always perfect. But when you're writing, and I mean, I have a whole course that we do lots of webinars on writing, and you think of a reference or a source that you want to bring in that's critical to your argument or the point that you're making, try and do it in the flow of constructing your sentence in your paragraph, right? Even if you just make a note of it and you highlight that document or that journal or that conference that you want to bring in, and you leave that to later and you bring that in, that's at least making a note of the citation that you want to do at the time. The best approach, as I teach in this course, is to load, and that's great, but the other referencing systems and source libraries will have probably similar features. In Microsoft Word, you will create a little button, and you'll be able to click that button and you'll be able to search your source library for the author or the journal or the conference that you're interested in bringing in. Click on it, and Word will automatically drop that citation into your paragraph, your sentences. Now, when you set up your reference library, you need to define which of these formats you're using, because when you cite in your paragraph or your sentence, it will use that format. That's the first thing it'll do. The second thing, it will add an entry into your reference section at the end of your document. Okay, so and we'll look at a couple of those examples. For example, in humanities, it'll put the author and then the year and then maybe one or two other fields. Now, very importantly, every piece of content out there, like we were saying, that we use the referencing system to access, and I'm talking about the formal academic content now, let's just stick with that for this webinar, will more or less have the same fields associated with that piece of data. Okay. If it's a journal article or a conference proceedings or someone else's final report that's available through a university database, author, year, title, etc. Those fields are the same, right? Regardless. But the format that you use for the faculty that you're working in defines what the fields are that are included when you cite as you write, and what the format is of the entry into the list of references at the end of your document. Okay, now what's beautiful about doing it in an automated way like I teach in the course is that you can then go and click one button and it will automatically change that notation and that format if you maybe for whatever reason did the wrong referencing notation and have to switch to another one, for example, or you write for a different journal or go to a different conference using the same content, etc. If you do that manually, it's going to take you ages and ages and ages. And I'm talking about manually both in terms of managing your sources, right? So let's say you go find a source, it's a PDF document. Okay. Now, where I started in my academic journey was I would just create a folder on my PC and I had a list of all those PDFs in there, and I just kind of put the title in the file name so I could go back and pick that out. You cannot do that. Definitely not for a PhD. And I would say almost for a master's, it's going to cost you hours and hours and hours and hours, because you're hard coding everything in. If you use EndNote and a proper plugin to Word, it automates all of that for you. And the course, so that's the mindset, that's the approach, that's just answering Moretla's question here. And the course of what I want to talk about today is just the usage of those tools to achieve that level of automation, but recognizing it will take a little bit of investment in time and possibly money up front to set that up so that you can then get efficient and quick at using that system at a later stage. And I went through this in my PhD. I started off and I was very clumsy and clunky and thought I would save time. Actually, I started using more time than it was necessary. So I figured it out for me, and I got it right, and I created a course, and I want you guys to have the same benefit, because who wants to sit formatting references in a Word document at 2 o'clock in the morning? That you do not want to waste your time on that. You want to spend your time on your research and properly critically engaging with your references, and the content of those references. The notation and the formatting, that's just acknowledging the system that we're working in, but let the tools do the hard work for you. Okay, Siski, good afternoon. MSc student from University of Pretoria. Hope to learn a lot from this platform about referencing and how to avoid mistakes in projects. Okay, so Siski, hopefully you got that little sort of tee up there, that intro to this topic that I was talking about just now, and hopefully you take that advice on board. And look, universities should provide some form of free access to a referencing or source library, like maybe Zotero or others. And so the principles that I teach are going to be the same here around automating that process of citing as you write. But again, the course is more specific to EndNote, and my experience of these types of tools is very much more from an EndNote and a Word perspective.